Hi, everybody. I thought we'll cover the different domains for the Cloud Practitioner exam in a bit more detail. I'll do videos, small ones on each of these domains. Domain 1, Cloud Concepts, 24% weight on the exam. Domain 2, Security and Compliance, 30%. Domain 3, Cloud Technology and Services, 34%. And then Domain 4, Billing, Pricing and Support at 12%. All of these are fairly important when you get to your exam. And I want to highlight the elements in each of these domains that is important for your exams. So I want to start off with just looking at 4 areas: the global infrastructure, cloud adoption framework, migration strategies, and the all-important well-architected framework. Now, I'll give you some tips as we go along. Firstly, if we start talking about your global infrastructure, the AWS global infrastructure, there is a set infrastructure that AWS has, and they categorize them as a region. Now, across the world, there are multiple different regions, and AWS have massive amount of infrastructure. So you get a region. They then split up their regions into availability zones, and there will be 3 or more of these availability zones. So you will find that region, and then there are those availability zones. And then in each of these availability zones, you'll find that on the premises, they'll have multiple data centers running in those specific availability zones. These availability zones, there are certain things that you also need to remember, that the distance between them is no greater than something like 100 kilometers. So if that is a region, and if that is the region that we have right now, and we go and paint this out, there's a region. In that region, there will be multiple availability zones. So I'll make 1, 2, 3 availability zones. Those availability zones, between them, you'll find that there is that distance of 100 kilometers maximum between this. And the reason for that is they want to be sure that they make these regions and the services that you run into in these regions as very low latency. So you find that there's availability zone. Let's mark them out: AZ1, availability zone 2, and availability zone 3. Now, this also speaks to another concept that AWS has, and this is the concept of high availability. So if you've got infrastructure, you will potentially take that infrastructure and you will move that infrastructure. For instance, you could have an EC2 instance in one availability zone, another one in a different availability zone, so that if there's any kind of failures between these availability zones as such, what you are definitely guaranteed of is that your services will still be available, routing through to the other availability zones as well, using services like load balancers. So from your global infrastructure, these are the important concepts to remember. Now, there's others that you need to know as well. There is the concept of a local zone. So where you don't have AWS resources in a city, for instance, they will have availability in what they call a local zone. A local zone is an area or in a different city that they've got AWS infrastructure, their core infrastructure, and customers that's close to that city will then be able to transact in that local zone to that local zone, and other services that they'll need, they will hunt through to a region. So you have local zones, you have also another service that they use for content delivery networks is the service of edge locations. So you have edge locations as well. And edge locations, this could be co-located with tier 1 ISPs. And what these edge locations will do is they will have content cached on those servers, and the customers that's closest to those edge locations, there's over 500 of them, they'll be able to go and get the content as close as possible to them. Then there's other services as well, like a wavelength zone. So you'll find that this is in your big areas where you maybe have these big 5G ISPs, and what they have is inside of their data centers, AWS has some kind of infrastructure as well. So that's a wavelength zone, and AWS will have resources in those as well. So now you're sitting with quite a few concepts to remember. You have your, and let me highlight all of these out. You have your regions, and those regions are split up into availability zones, and those availability zones will have multiple data centers running in them. Where they don't have a region, they may have, it's not all across the globe, but they may have a local zone. And then in other areas as well, they could be running services like wavelength zones and definitely edge locations for their caching service, CloudFront, where they do content delivery network. So that's on the global infrastructure perspective. Now, customers will look at that and determine yes or no, AWS is a good option for them based on one of the reasons would be global infrastructure. Next thing that they will then do is decide within the company, should they be moving over to AWS as a service? Now it becomes important to look at the global or the Cloud Adoption Framework or CAF. This runs across what they call perspectives. So they've got different types of perspectives in as well, and there are 6 of them. The first perspective is business. Now, this makes sense, right? Think of it as any business needs to decide if the cloud is for them. So you get the perspective of, does our business align to us moving over to the cloud? Yes, no, great. That is a decision to be made. Next one is people. If we move over to the cloud, do we have the necessary people to do the migration for us, to maintain it for us, to adopt whatever services we want to use? Do we have the necessary people, and what do we need to do to get those people? HR may need to get involved, and different people as well, to make sure that we have the right people there. Next is governance. So we've got the people, we can move over, but do we have enough guardrails within our company from a stakeholder perspective, from your CIO, the board, the CEOs? Do we have some kind of governance in play within our company as well? Now, those are just your business perspectives, right? And now we can start looking at the technical perspective, things like uh, different kinds of things that we can now start looking at. For instance, we can now start thinking about the platform. Can we move over to the cloud, and do they have the necessary platform for us to run on? What we run now in our data center, do they have some kind of capability in the cloud for us to move our services or our applications over? So there's a platform perspective. Then, really important is security. When we move over to the cloud, is it secure? Does it have the same type of security we have in our on-premises environment, or better? And these are, again, some other decisions on the technical side that we need to make as well. And the last one is operations. It is great to know that our business does align for us to move over to IT, that we've got the necessary people, or we're hiring the people, that we've got enough governance in place for our auditors to be happy, for our stakeholders to be happy, moving over to the cloud and the governance services that they have. They do have the right platform. This could be operating systems, could be databases, could be whatever you need to go and take what you've got in your on-premises environment and then move that over to the cloud. Next is security. Is it secure? Can our auditors sign off at the end of every year or quarter or biannually to say, yes, this is secure, it adheres to this kind of security attestation? And then there is operations as well. Can we operate in the cloud? If something goes wrong, can we get up and fix it and keep on running again? So now that is our next step. After we looked at the global infrastructure, we decide if we have uh, a need to move to the cloud, and then if we have the people, the governance, etc. This is your cloud adoption framework. Can I adopt the cloud? Now that we've got that, now we start thinking about migration strategies. How are we going to migrate? What are we going to migrate? Now, this is where we start looking at other things as well. We start thinking about things like should we retire this application that is currently running in there? And this they call the 7 R's of migration. So first one is, should we just retire this application and not move it over to the cloud? After we decide, nope, we need it in play, we can start thinking about other options as well, like just a replatform. And so we could go and replatform this. And this is typically where we say it is a lift, tinker, and shift. We're tinkering with some stuff to make it work in the cloud as well. There is the next one that we can look at, for instance, is retain. Now, where we decide we want to retire it, There may be other areas as well where we could decide, listen, we need to retain this in our on-premises environment because the platform doesn't exist for us to move over to the cloud. Maybe it's an old mainframe system that you can't move to the cloud. So we will retain it in our on-premises environment. Then we could be looking at relocate. And what we do with the relocate is we maybe say we're moving from one cloud provider to a different one, or we could be thinking about I'm transferring my database that is running in AWS, the RDS database, I'm moving it to another account, for instance. So that could be your relocate. Then there are things like repurchase. Repurchase is typically when you look and you are running an application and a version of that exists on AWS's platform. So instead of migrating that application from your on-premises to the cloud, how about just purchasing it off the marketplace as an example? So you are repurchasing. It's also called a drop and shop. These are AWS terms, right? And then the last one that we could also be looking at, and this is the most expensive one, it is refactor. Refactor, or it is also known as re-architect. This is when I'm looking at all of the benefits of the cloud, and I now decide, hey, I want to make use of all of that. I will redesign this application. I will take all of the steps. We will go to our developers, to our solutions architect, and we will put into play a new system. So we're going to re-architect this from the bottom up. So from scratch, we are going to develop this. Now, these are your migration strategies that you'll decide after you looked and said, yes, we can adopt the cloud, looking at the CAF. And yes, the AWS infrastructure is great enough for us to do this. There is enough services. They've got enough data centers in their availability zones, in their regions. And where they don't have that, there's some local zones for our customers to transact as close as possible to them. So that is speed of my application, or there is a caching service like edge locations that we can use. And again, the availability zones is maximum of 100 kilometers between all of this. So re-platform, retire, retain, relocate, repurchase, and refactor. These are your different migration strategies. Now, just on retain, I think it's important that I mention the following. So there's retain. Right. One of the things about retain is if I retain, this means I'm running on-prem, on-premises, and I'm running in the cloud. Now, this is a typical question that comes up as well. So if I'm running both on-prem and in the cloud, this is what AWS call a hybrid system. So now I'm running a hybrid system. I'm doing this because you may have questions on that. It's a hybrid system. So instead of cloud, I'm running it on-prem. Now, by the way, cloud has another name as well. If I'm maybe moving to the cloud, and I've got my on-prem as another name as well. From time to time, this is also known, if I'm virtualizing my environments in my on-premises environment, this is also known as a private cloud. So you could be sitting with a private cloud environment as well, and you could see this popping up on your exams as well. So that's just another name for your on-premises environment. If I'm using both on-premises and I'm using cloud, they call that a hybrid system as well. Then the last one that I want to speak to is your well-architected framework. Now, my best tip that I want to leave everybody is, and I'll highlight this maybe in red, the well-architected framework. There is a white paper on the well-architected framework. I want to urge you to read this white paper. This white paper is extremely important because many of the concepts is discussed across security, across many other areas as well. So they call these the pillars. There are 6 pillars in the well-architected framework. There's even a tool that they have. So it's a well-architected framework paper. There is a well-architected framework tool as well that if you're on your AWS account, you can run this on your infrastructure as well. So there's a well-architected framework, and it covers certain areas that is extremely important. So one of the pillars is operational excellence. Operational excellence that they cover in there. Another one is security. Security for AWS is extremely important. So security is another pillar as well. reliability. You want to run reliably in the cloud, and AWS wants to assist you with that as well. So they give you these best practices on that pillar as well. There is reliability, then there is performance efficiency. Performance efficiency. I'll just make that here. Let me write it out. Performance efficiency. One of the other areas as well that is also important, they want to make sure that you spend the least of money on them. So there's cost optimization, and there are multiple different tools that they do make available for you to make sure that you stay cost optimized. Then the last one is sustainability. How is what you're running in the cloud, how does that impact the environment, right? How does it impact your environment? So there's sustainability, and these are the pillars. I'll just make that pillars that AWS has, and they are operational excellence, security, reliability, performance, efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability as well. Now, if you read through the well-architected framework tool, they cover many of the services, they cover many of these different tools and concepts that you need to look at. And we are talking definitely about cloud concepts. So it does speak to how you will adapt from on-premises to the cloud, some of the things that you should be putting together. And this, as far as the first domain is concerned, you'll find that you get a lot of answers correct if you cover these. Global architecture definitely comes in. Cloud adoption framework. Some of those questions, I'm going to be honest with you, could be fairly tricky. So make sure that you go through the cloud adoption framework in detail. Then there's migration strategies, the 7 Rs. There could be some questions around that as well. And then the well-architected framework, the white papers, please, definitely, you must read that. I'm not even kidding about that one. It is extremely important as part of the exam. So domain 1, these are the concepts that I want you to consider and to read. And next, when the other videos, we'll cover domain 2, security and compliance, cloud technologies and services, and billing and pricing as well. So what shows as well, this is all to prepare you for your exam. And again, good luck for those writing the exams. Hope you get that ace and you pass it.